June 23, 1942. At Pembrey Airfield in South Wales, Royal Air Force spotters watched through binoculars as a sleek German fighter came down through the clouds, preparing to land. The sirens should have been sounding, and the anti-aircraft guns should have been ready. But something about the pilot's movements looked strange. Careful, steady, almost like he belonged there. The Focke-Wulf 190 touched down gently on the grass runway and rolled to a stop near the control tower. Its engine went silent. The canopy slid open, and Oberleutnant Armin Faber of Jagdgeschwader II climbed out, removed his leather helmet, and looked around at the unfamiliar surroundings. Then it hit him. The aircraft nearby weren't Messerschmitt Bf-109s, they were Spitfires. The men running toward him weren't wearing Luftwaffe gray, but Royal Air Force blue. In that instant, Faber realized his terrible mistake, just as British intelligence officers across southern England grasped the incredible news. Germany's deadliest fighter, the same aircraft that had been destroying Allied planes for months, had just landed in Britain completely intact. The pilot had simply lost his way and thought he was in France. For the Allies, this was a massive intelligence breakthrough. When RAF test pilots finally examined the aircraft, what they found changed how every Allied fighter would engage German planes for the rest of the war. For 8 months, the Focke-Wulf 190 had been a nightmare, dominating the skies over the Channel. It first appeared in combat in September 1941, and from that moment, Allied pilots knew they faced something extraordinary. Squadron leader Johnny Johnson, who later became Britain's top ace, encountered the FW-190 in early 1942 and barely made it out alive. It was faster than our Spitfire Mark Vs in level flight and in the dive, he wrote. It could outroll us, and its firepower was devastating. For the first time in the war, our fighters were completely outclassed. The numbers told the same story. During the first half of 1942, RAF losses over France rose sharply. Skilled pilots who had survived the Battle of Britain were now being shot down by an opponent they couldn't outmatch. The FW-190 could dive away from Spitfires, roll faster in dogfights, and rip them apart with 20mm cannon shells. When American pilots arrived in Britain with their new P-47 Thunderbolts, they were warned immediately. Don't turn with a 190, don't try to roll with it, and don't compete in a dive. The list of what not to do was long. The list of what to do was dangerously short. British intelligence urgently needed to understand what made the FW-190 so powerful, and what its weaknesses were. But everyone that had been shot down was too badly damaged to study. Then came Armin Faber's fateful mistake. Before we move on, tell me, where are you watching from, and what do you know about the FW-190? Drop a comment below if you've heard this story before, and if you enjoy this level of historical detail. Don't forget to subscribe. These stories take a lot of research, and your support makes it all worthwhile. Oberleutnant Armin Faber wasn't a rookie. At just 21, he had already scored several victories and was a respected member of Jagdgeschwader II, the elite Richthofen squadron. Fighter Wing. On June 23, 1942, Armin Faber was flying as part of a fighter escort over the English Channel, protecting German bombers attacking coastal targets. The mission had gone smoothly until the flight back. Somewhere over the Channel, during fast, twisting combat with British fighters, Faber lost his bearings. Clouds hid the coastline, and the sun's position gave him false clues about direction. When he broke through the clouds and saw green fields with an airfield below, he made a simple but fatal mistake. He thought he was looking at a Luftwaffe base in France. In reality, he was over Wales, staring down at RAF Pembrey. The error seems unbelievable now, but combat disorientation was far more common than most people realized. Pilots flying at high speed through clouds, pulling tight turns that strained blood flow to the brain, often lost their sense of direction. Faber had unknowingly made a 180-degree turn during the fight and didn't realize it. When he landed and noticed the Spitfires, Faber tried to restart his engine and take off again. But RAF personnel were already closing in. Within minutes, he was captured, and British intelligence was examining the undamaged Focke-Wulf 190A3 sitting on their runway. The excitement at RAF headquarters was electric. Air Chief Marshal Sholto Douglas, commander of Fighter Command, immediately ordered the aircraft sent to the Royal Aircraft Establishment at Farnborough for testing. Every part of the plane was to be examined, measured, and studied. Within 48 hours, the FW-190 was at Farnborough under the hands of Britain's best aviation engineers. What they found explained everything Allied pilots had been struggling with in combat. The aircraft was a masterpiece of practical design. While the Spitfire represented graceful aerodynamics, the FW-190 was pure engineering power. Its BMW 801 radial engine produced 1,700 horsepower compared to the Spitfire MKV's 1,470. But power alone wasn't the reason it dominated. Its biggest advantage was its incredible roll rate. It could flip from one side to the other faster than any Allied plane. This single trait made it revolutionary in dogfights. When a Spitfire tried to follow the FW-190 through a series of rolls, it couldn't keep up. The German pilot could change direction, gain position, and fire before his opponent could react. British test pilot Captain Eric Brown flew the captured F-190 extensively and quickly understood why so many Allied pilots had died fighting it. The ailerons were light and responsive at every speed. "You could toss this aircraft around the sky with almost no effort," he reported. The Spitfire took strength and precision. The FW-190 responded instantly, almost as if it read your thoughts. The firepower difference was equally shocking. The FW-190A3 carried four 20mm MG-151 cannons and two 7.92mm machine guns. A 2-second burst from those guns delivered more explosive force than a Spitfire Mark V could in 10 seconds of fire. And because the weapons were mounted close to the fuselage, their shots formed a tight, deadly pattern that tore enemy aircraft apart. Its diving ability explained how German pilots often escaped pursuit. The FW-190's heavier frame and cleaner shape meant it could outdive anything in the RAF's arsenal. British pilots who followed one into a dive often watched helplessly as the German fighter pulled away with ease. But the tests also exposed its weaknesses. And that's where the real intelligence value became strategic gold for the Allies. The FW-190's radial engine, though powerful, suffered at high altitudes. Above 20,000 feet, its performance dropped sharply. The engine struggled in the thin air, often overheating and losing power. In contrast, the Spitfire's Merlin engine, built for high-altitude performance, actually got better the higher it flew. The same weight that made the FW-190 an excellent diver also made it less agile in long-turning battles. While it could outroll a Spitfire, it couldn't outturn one if the fight dragged on. If Allied pilots could draw the FW-190 into a flat, sustained turn, the advantage shifted in their favor. The tests also showed another major weakness. At very high speeds, over 400 km/h, the FW-190's controls became extremely heavy. Pilots needed great physical strength to pull out of a dive. This created a brief but deadly window. If an Allied pilot could chase the FW-190 through its dive and strike during the pullout, the German pilot would be too busy fighting his own controls to react. RAF Fighter Command quickly issued tactical bulletins across all squadrons. The guidance was clear and practical. Below 20,000 feet, don't try to outroll the enemy and avoid following into steep dives. Instead, force a turning battle where the Spitfire's lighter wings gave an edge. Whenever possible, fight above 20,000 feet, where the FW-190's performance dropped off. The new Spitfire Mark V, with its upgraded Merlin engine, held the upper hand in thin air. And if an FW-190 dove away, don't follow immediately. Wait until it pulled up again, then attack when its controls became sluggish. This new intelligence spread rapidly through RAF units. Pilots who had once feared the FW-190's reputation now had confidence in tactics. They learned that it wasn't an unbeatable machine, just a highly capable one with weaknesses that could be used against it. Squadron leader Johnny Johnson later said, "The captured 190 changed everything. We stopped fighting on its terms and made it fight on ours." Losses dropped immediately. But the intelligence victory didn't stop with the RAF. British command made a crucial decision. They invited American test pilots to Farnborough to fly the captured FW-190 themselves. In August 1942, U.S. Army Air Force pilots arrived to study Germany's top fighter. What they learned would save hundreds of American lives. Major Cass Hoof, one of the first to test fly it, wrote a detailed report shared across every fighter unit preparing for Europe. His conclusions were clear and tactical. The FW-190 will beat any Allied fighter below 20,000 feet if the German pilot knows his job. Our advantage is altitude. Above 25,000 feet, our P-47s have the edge. Force them high and we win. Let them fight low and we die. That single insight reshaped American air strategy. When P-47 Thunderbolt squadrons began combat operations in 1943, they emphasized high-altitude engagements. Bomber escorts flew as high as possible, and fighter patrols stayed above 25,000 feet. When German fighters tried to engage, American pilots climbed, forcing the Luftwaffe to fight where their powerful FW-190s were weakest, forcing the FW-190 into thin air where its engine performance dropped sharply. The captured fighter didn't just change tactics, it shaped American aircraft design. Engineers at Wright Field studied the German plane closely, focusing on its incredible roll rate. They adjusted the ailerons on the P-47 Thunderbolt and P-51 Mustang to improve their response time. The FW-190's tightly grouped gun placement also influenced U.S. design thinking, encouraging more concentrated firepower. Even its cockpit layout, streamlined for efficiency in combat, inspired American engineers to rethink ergonomics in their own fighters. By late 1943, the tide had turned. P-47s and P-51s were meeting FW-190s high above Europe, where Allied aircraft now held the edge. The upgraded Spitfire Mk9, powered by advanced Merlin engines, could match or exceed the German fighter at most altitudes. Both sides understood they were flying machines optimized for different strengths. The result was clear. Kill ratios began to shift in the Allies' favor. FW-190 losses rose steadily as Allied pilots used every lesson learned from Faber's captured aircraft. German pilots could tell something had changed. Oberleutnant Josef Pips Priller, one of the Luftwaffe's top FW-190 aces, wrote in late 1943 that American pilots had clearly studied the aircraft. "They no longer follow us into rolling scissors. They force us high where our engines suffer. They've learned." Faber's captured FW-190 remained at Farnborough for the rest of the war, serving as a benchmark for analyzing new German models. When the FW-190 Dora, with its inline engine, appeared in late 1944, Allied engineers compared it directly to Faber's plane to see how German designers had tried to fix the altitude problem. After the war, historians assessed the true scale of Faber's mistake. The knowledge gained from his aircraft was shared with thousands of Allied pilots through manuals, films, and live demonstrations. It shaped aircraft engineering, air combat strategy, and mission planning across Allied air forces. Captain Eric Brown, who flew more captured enemy planes than any other Allied pilot, later wrote, "Faber's navigation error gave us the Rosetta Stone for understanding German fighter design. Every strength of the FW-190 was documented, every weakness exploited. That one aircraft probably saved more Allied lives than any intelligence victory of the war." Even the Germans recognized the irony. One Luftwaffe officer remarked, "We spent months trying to capture a Spitfire Mark V intact. The British didn't have to try. We handed them our best fighter." Armin Faber spent the rest of the war as a prisoner in Canada. He survived, returning to Germany after 1945, where he lived until 1976. Initially blamed for the loss, later reviews admitted that combat disorientation could happen to anyone. The real surprise, however, was that German intelligence had assumed Britain would never recover an intact FW-190. Faber's story offers a timeless lesson about technology in war. The Focke-Wulf 190 was a breakthrough in 1941. Fast, powerful, and deadly. But its dominance ended the moment the Allies could study it firsthand. Every design has trade-offs. The FW-190's low-altitude power cost it high-altitude performance. Its unmatched roll rate meant heavy controls at high speed. Its weapons and armor added weight that reduced agility. Once those trade-offs were known, the aircraft's edge vanished. Today, the FW-190 is remembered as one of World War II's greatest fighters, displayed in museums as a marvel of German engineering. Yet its legend is forever tied to the intelligence coup that revealed its secrets. One moment of confusion over the English Channel turned Germany's deadliest weapon into an open book. The plane Armin Faber mistakenly landed in Britain became the machine that taught the Allies how to win. It proved a lasting truth. Superior technology helps, but superior intelligence decides victory. Sometimes the greatest breakthroughs in war come not from strategy or firepower, but from a single mistake that gives your enemy exactly what they need. The Focke-Wulf 190 could have remained a mystery, a feared, invincible killer dominating the skies through speed and psychology. Instead, it became a classroom in the air, a captured teacher that trained Allied pilots how to survive and prevail. One navigational error, one landing, one captured fighter that turned the air war over Europe in the Allies' favor. The captured FW-190 completely changed the balance of air power in Europe. RAF and American pilots began forcing German fighters higher into the thin, freezing air, altitudes where their engines lost power and struggled to stay efficient. The same aircraft that had once dominated low-altitude combat was now fighting on enemy terms, but the impact went even further. The engineers at Wright Field in the United States carefully studied every inch of the captured FW-190. They focused on its astonishing roll rate, how quickly it could change direction in a fight, and used that research to improve the ailerons on the P-47, Thunderbolt, and P-51 Mustang, making them more responsive and agile. The German fighters' clever gun placement, tightly grouped near the fuselage, also shaped American ideas about weapon concentration. Even the cockpit design, built for maximum visibility and efficiency, influenced the next generation of Allied fighters. By the end of 1943, the air war looked very different. American P-47s and P-51s now ruled the high altitudes where German engines gasped for air. The Spitfire Mark V, fitted with its new Merlin engine, could finally match the FW-190 at almost any height. The advantage that once belonged to the Luftwaffe had vanished. German aces noticed the change immediately. Their opponents no longer made the same mistakes. Allied pilots refused to follow them into rolling dives and twisting scissors. Instead, they climbed higher, turning the skies themselves into a weapon. Oberleutnant Josef Pips Priller, one of Germany's top FW-190 pilots, admitted the truth in his diary. "The Americans have learned. They do not follow us low anymore. They force us high where our engines choke. They know our tricks. The FW-190 that Faber mistakenly landed at RAF Pembrey became one of the most studied aircraft of the entire war. It remained at Farnborough as a reference model, used to compare every new German variant that appeared. When the improved FW-190D9 Dora arrived in 1944 with its inline engine, Allied engineers immediately placed it beside Faber's original to see how German designers had tried to fix their altitude problems. After the war, historians tried to measure the true value of Faber's error. The data gathered from his plane was shared across Allied air forces through training manuals, instructional films, and even live demonstration flights. It changed how pilots fought, how aircraft were designed, and how future tactics were taught. Captain Eric Brown, who flew more captured enemy planes than anyone else in the Allied air forces, later wrote, "Faber's navigational mistake gave us the Rosetta Stone of German fighter design. Every advantage was recorded, every weakness exploited. That one plane may have saved more Allied lives than any other single event of the air war." The irony wasn't lost on the Germans. One Luftwaffe officer later said, "We tried for months to capture a Spitfire Mark V to study its improvements. The British didn't have to try. We delivered our best fighter straight to them." Armin Faber himself spent the rest of the war as a prisoner in Canada. He survived, returned home after 1945, and lived quietly in Germany until 1976. Though first blamed for the loss, later records accepted that what happened to him, disorientation in combat, could have happened to any pilot. The true failure lay in German intelligence, which never believed Britain could get its hands on a fully intact FW-190. The story of Faber's captured fighter is more than an accident. It's a reminder of how fragile technological advantage can be. The Focke-Wulf 190 had been a revolutionary machine. Fast, rugged, and deadly, but its supremacy lasted only until the Allies could study it closely. Every engineering triumph came with trade-offs. Its strength in low-altitude combat meant weakness in thin air. Its powerful weapons added weight. Its lightning-fast roll rate came at the cost of heavy high-speed controls. Once those limits were understood, its mystery was gone. Today, surviving FW-190s stand proudly in museums around the world. Monuments to brilliant engineering and to one extraordinary mistake. Because one fog-shrouded day over the English Channel, a single pilot took a wrong turn, landed on the wrong airfield, and unknowingly handed his enemy the key to victory. The Focke-Wulf 190 could have remained a legend, a terrifying ghost of the skies. Instead, it became a teacher, a captured machine that rewrote Allied tactics and saved countless lives. One wrong turn, one landing, one moment that changed the air war forever, proving that while superior technology wins battles, superior intelligence wins wars.